Magandang araw, Podmates! Isa na naman talakayan tungkol sa mga nagbabagang issue. Ngayon, digmaan sa Ukraine na isang taon na at wala pang katapusan. Anong epekto nito sa ekonomiya natin? Lalawak ba ang giyera? Maari bang magkagera sa Asia at posible ba tayong madamay? Para talakayan ng mga yan, kausap ko ngayon ang political scientist si Dr. Aries Arugay, chair ng Political Science Department sa UP Diliman. Magandang araw sa iyo, Professor Arugay.
Magandang araw, Howie. Magandang araw sa iyong mga tagapakinig.
So, Prof, kailangan namin yung iyong political science perspective dito kasi may isang taon na ang gera sa Ukraine, ano? At marami pang malabo hanggang ngayon. Wala pang liwanag kung paano at kailan ito matatapos. Posibleng lumawak pa, no? May nagsasabi pa nga patungo na ito sa isang World War III. Ang Duterte administration, yung dating Duterte administration, may official neutral position dito. Neutrality ang official position niya. Pero alam nating personally, he was an admirer of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ngayon, si Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has pivoted away from neutrality at kumampi sa Ukraine at sa mga kaalyado nito, namely the United States. I know that you disagreed with our neutral position when it came to war in the Ukraine. Una, what's wrong with neutrality, Prof? Bakit kailangan may kinakampihan tayo rito na napakalayo naman sa atin itong gerang ito?
Meron akong dalawang nakikitang punto, no? Unang-una, yung neutrality kasi normally ginagawa yan ng isang bansa kung meron siyang kakayahang talagang itiwalag yung sarili niya sa nangyayari, no, sa international relations. So Switzerland may kasaysayan na neutrality, but alam natin na mayamang bansa at self-sufficient siya, no? Kasi when you say neutrality, ang ibig sabihin, hindi ka pumuposisyon, no? No comment ka sa lahat, wala kang kinakampihan. Ngunit sa tingin ko na-expose yung problema ng posisyon na yon para sa Pilipinas. Kasi hindi tayo self-sufficient both economically and in terms of security, no? Napaka-vulnerable natin. At kung kayang gawin yon ng Russia at ng isang makapangyarihang bansa, no, sa maliliit na bansa, na-expose din yung ating vulnerability bilang isang maliit na bansa. Paano tayo magiging neutral kung tayo naman na yung parang maging Ukraine? At ano yung mararamdaman natin pag yung ibang bansa, ganun yung posisyon sa atin? No? So I think yung neutrality goes against the diplomatic historical positioning of the Philippines because dito na ako sa pangalawang punto, no? Blatant violation ito ng UN Charter. Founding member ng United Nations ang Pilipinas. This is a grave threat to the peace and stability of the entire globe. At kung titignan natin yung mga posisyon natin before, hindi tayo naging neutral pag ang inaapi na ay mas maliit na bansa. Kasi ramdam din natin yon sa ating kasaysayan, sa ating posisyon ngayon, na kailangan natin tumindig against violations of international law. Kasi yun yung identity natin bilang isang bansa.
Okay, so yung una, security reason para sa sarili nating interest, no? Yung pangalawa ay moral, di ba? Para magkaroon tayong moral standing din sa mundo, no? But during his presidential campaign, si Pangulong Marcos was siding with the Duterte neutrality position, di ba? On the whole range of foreign policy positions ng Duterte administration, kumampi si Pangulong Marcos, no? Do you think he's just suddenly saw the light? Kasi si Pangulong Marcos has basically pivoted away from a number of positions of the Duterte administration. Of course, kaalyado niya yung mga Duterte, no? Of course, Vice President niya si Sara Duterte, yung anak ng dating Pangulo, no? So, do you think these are just cards he was hiding in his sleeve the whole time, or nung once na nakuupo siya, nakita niya talaga yung katotohanan, yung talagang tunay na threat sa Pilipinas at nagbago na yung kanyang pananaw?
Right. Pwede yung sagutin ng dalawang perspektibo, no? Sa perspective ng electoral politics, no? pagka kumakandidato ka kasi gagawin mo lahat para mahalal eh. So, nung time na yon, very popular, no? Ang taas ng trust rating ni President Duterte na any veering away, no, from his positioning, medyo may threat na mababawasan yung boto mo kung ikaw yung kandidato. So I think by the pure logic of trying to win the election, Marcos's positions mirrored, no, a lot of the positions of the incumbent president, President Rodrigo Duterte. So yun yung sa domestic side, no, yung political side. Pero from the international relations perspective, no, iba na rin kasi pag ikaw na yung nagmamaneho nung sasakyan, kung yung sasakyan natin, yung bansa natin, no, kaysa yung nakikisakay ka lang, no. I think what President Marcos has been exposed to is yung increasing vulnerability ng Pilipinas, na pag hindi siya pumosisyon sa mga issues na tulad ng Ukraine War, tulad ng West Philippine Sea, lalo tong nilalagay yung bansa natin sa panganib. So I think yung mas rational yung pangalawa, no? Ibig sabihin, inisip niya na, teka, if I remain neutral sa Ukraine War, if I remain silent sa ginagawa ng China's incursions into the West Philippine Sea, mas lalong nagiging problema yung seguridad sa bansa, no? So in his own calculation perhaps, and maybe through the influence ng kanyang mga nakakausap ng mga bansa, no, ang kanyang positioning ngayon is Philippines national security first. Kaya malaki yung diferensya niya kay dating Presidente Duterte kasi wala siyang bagahe na kaibigan ko si Putin, no? 3 beses ako pumunta sa Russia, may personal akong relasyon sa kanya. Walang ganung klaseng relasyon, no? Si President Marcos. And therefore, hindi ganun kahirap na pumanig siya sa Ukraine, lalo na pwede tayong makakita ng parallels, meaning katulad, no, na sitwasyon na medyo may malaking bansa na nagsitrete ng ating territorial integrity, hindi mahirap makita yung equivalence eh.
Well, itong sinasabi mong bagahe, no, so-called bagahe ni dating Pangulong Duterte na naging kaibigan niya si Russian President Putin. Pinili naman niya yun eh. Pinili niya yung, no one forced him to visit Russia 3 times na maging admirer ni Putin, ano. So I mean, itong bagahe na to, no, I guess this is part of this whole positioning ng Pilipinas in the last 6 years nung administrasyon ni Pangulong Duterte, ano. But would you say that's a temporary disruption ng ating foreign policy trajectory? Kasi itong sinasabi mo ngang positioning ni Pangulong Marcos ngayon, ano, na pro-US, yon, pro-Western alliance, no? These are traditional positions na may historical basis and may proof of concept yan, no? I mean, they've just generally kept us safe from invasion, no? Kumbaga, I mean, if it's not broken, why fix it? Of course, that's a matter of perspective din, ano? But would you say na this yung panahon ni Pangulong Duterte, that was just a kind of I mean, historically speaking, I mean, years from now, it's going to look like, oh, that was just a brief episode in this long foreign policy trajectory, or is it more significant than that?
Sa akin may role talaga yung personalidad ni Pangulong Duterte, kasi kung formally speaking, no, hindi naman tayo naging neutral when we voted sa United Nations at sa UN Human Rights Council when the resolution was to remove Russia as a member of the UN Human Rights Council because of the atrocities in the Ukraine, no? The Philippines, in fact, and Myanmar, ironically, were the only 2 ASEAN countries who voted for the resolution, while yung mga iba nating kapitbahay sa Southeast Asia abstained. So, ang analysis namin dito is that yung foreign policy bureaucracy natin was also veering away from the personal positioning of President Duterte. At since nasa tail end na yun ng administration ni Duterte, medyo hindi napabayaan na, no? Tama ka na parang traditional yung positioning ni President Marcos. But let's also remember that President Duterte's worldview mirrors that of Putin, yung itong challenging the West at itong anti liberal democracy mentality, yung populist strong versus populist strongmen. Medyo merong connect si President Duterte dito kasi pwede niyang i-trace yung atrocities ng Amerika sa Mindanao historically, at pati na rin yung hypocrisy, no, in terms of human rights violations, yung sa drug war niya. I mean, who is the US and the West and the EU to criticize when sila din, they have lots of violations of democracy and human rights. So walang ganun si President Marcos, and his family, especially during the Cold War, was coddled by the West, by the United States. During the Cold War, alam natin to, kasaysayan historically, the US and the West were supporting authoritarian governments because back then, the enemy was communism. So kahit rightist authoritarian leader ka, hindi ka masyado i-criticize. And because of that, talagang yung linkages ng Marcos family, katulad ni President Marcos, mas natitrace mo yan sa West more than sa revisionist countries like Russia and China, which Duterte did not necessarily acquire, no? Lalo na kasi hindi naman talaga siya part nung Imperial Manila elite, no, that is more linked to the West than President Duterte.
Yeah, it's also showed how the world has also changed, no? Kasi nga dati some democracies just for practical or pragmatic geopolitical reasons sided with authoritarians. These days, the authoritarians seem to be siding with each other, di ba? If you recall, si Duterte not just had this personal relationship with Putin, but also Donald Trump, di ba? Donald Trump had a similar friendship with Putin, or admiration, in fact. And then, a number of these other populists around the world had a similar sentiment about Putin, who kind of wrote the playbook on how to be kind of a long-lasting authoritarian, But what's ironic here is that sabi mo nga, I mean, in these days, these authoritarians, they kind of have a affinity for each other. But we know that si Pangulong Marcos, he is the son of what is widely known as the dictator of the Philippines in the 70s to the 80s, no? So baka may nakakita ng irony diyan na bakit hindi siya kumakampi kay Putin, di ba? So does that mean yung ating kasulukuyang pangulo, although he has those family roots, he's trying to create that kind of separation from his father. I mean, he wants to show na he's not an authoritarian. He's not the kind of leader who will be drawn to the likes of Putin and will actually side with a pro-democracy leader like Zelensky in Ukraine.
Right. I think a big difference between President Duterte and President Marcos. President Duterte is more upfront, and mas sa kanya hindi niya kailangang balutin yung kanyang political leanings into something that is more acceptable or is more performative, no? And let's trace back, no? President Marcos Sr. tried to put some legalistic democratic trappings into martial law. Kaya 'di ba, parang it's authoritarianism but constitutional in nature. So itong lip service to and rhetoric of democracy, of democratic governance, parang nasa playbook din to ng mga Marcoses that they don't really need to smash and to directly antagonize democratic institutions. But that's not the only way you erode democratic institutions. You could also do a pay lip service to them Meaning, kunyari sa panlabas, no, merong ganitong klaseng facade, merong ganitong klaseng posturing o yung democratic performativity, sabi nga sa amin sabi nga ng mga sociologists, but in reality, you're not doing anything really to defend or improve democracy at home. So pag panlabas, parang may palabas ka na wala akong tinatapakan ng mga institusyon ng demokrasya, pero ibang klase pag naghukay pa at pag tinitigan mo talaga, no, yung kalagayan ng bansa.
So, kumbaga si Pangulong Marcos has a less personalized style, no, when it comes to foreign policy, no? I mean, he's not going to curse world leaders unlike his predecessor, no? But at the same time, he has tried to change the game a little bit, no? Well, maybe in a big way when he named his first national security advisor, was a political scientist like yourself, no? Si Professor Clarita Carlos. And however, she was edged out supposedly by the military and security establishment, criticized as not having any military background, etc. So, kumbaga, this effort by President Marcos to kind of think out of the box, let's put it that way, no, was in a way even vetoed or canceled out, no, or at least inoppose ng security establishment natin. So we're really back on this traditional, very conventional foreign policy trajectory and the ways of thinking about security.
Yeah, I think ganito, I mean, even if we say na the Marcoses were removed from power, but if you look at them as a dynasty, they've always been integrated, no, with the political class of the entire country. Kaya nga hindi mo talaga ma-disentangle yung mga Marcoses with the political establishment in the country even after martial law, no? So minsan yung mga appointments niya ititrace mo na parang you can actually, even if they've been appointed by other presidents, matitrace mo pa rin na meron pa rin connection to with the Marcos family, because the Marcoses have truly never left power and continue and has remained integrated, no, with the dynastic ecosystem of Philippine politics.
Whereas his predecessor, si former President Duterte, was really out of those circles, no? Ay talagang he was an outsider. Oo. Balikan ko lang tong gera sa Ukraine, no? Na may posibilidad ba na lalawak pa ang gera? I mean, it's been a year and there's no end in sight. In fact, there's now talk that lalong tumitindi, no, yung gera. Despite so many casualties, so many deaths on both sides, so much ammunition spent, mukhang there are even reports that the global production of weapons, no, cannot keep up with the use of the ammunition in Ukraine. So posible pang lumawak itong gerang ito.
Howie, nagtuturo ako ng international relations siguro almost 15 years na, no, and there was a time na yung consensus, no, sa pag-aaral ng international relations that the age of conventional warfare is over because may nuclear weapons ka na at yung susunod na gera between major powers will be the end of civilization kasi nuclear war na, no. But what we're seeing in the invasion of Ukraine is that pwede pa rin, conventional warfare can still exist short of nuclear warfare, and I'm sure even si Putin is surprised na until now kasi siguro ang calculation nila na mabilis lang, no, itong gera na to mabilis lang masasakop
miscalculated
yung Ukraine. Yep. Kasi sa teorya sa international relations, oftentimes non-democratic or authoritarian leaders, sila yung prone to miscalculation when going to war, at yung mga democratic countries, mas maganda yung record nila kasi mas available yung information, no? Mas transparent, mas may mga checks, so that when they decide mas sigurista sila, no, compared sa mga dictators. What we're seeing right now, and tatagal pa to, at kasi maraming debate to, no, na is this a new Cold War? Kasi nung Cold War may mga proxy wars, di ba? Yung gera sa Vietnam was actually internal siya, pero it's actually the US versus the Soviet Union during that time. The greatest fear right now, at sinabi to, no, sa isang malaking conference on security, global security sa Munich, no, a few days ago, is that China will participate, no? And this is why US State Secretary Blinken said na warned China not to get involved, because the moment it gets involved, then what is happening in Ukraine will truly be a proxy war, meaning Russia is there, but China will be there helping Russia, so allegedly, and Europe and the US on the side of Ukraine. At kung mangyari yon, lalong tatagal itong gerang to, kasi marami ka ng players, marami ka ng ibang bansa, and the more lives will suffer, will be lost, and yung ating disruptions on supply chains, on energy, will continue. So ito yung hinihiling ngayon na magkaroon sana ng constraint, no? Because in wars, hindi mo na maiiwasan yan pag nagsimula na yan, no? One decision will lead to another, and magigising na lang tayo that it is no longer a war in that part of the world, but wag naman sana mangyari, but it will be a larger a war of a larger scale that will involve more countries apart from Russia and the Ukraine.
Well, nabanggit po kanina na dictators are often more prone to miscalculation, because they mostly surround themselves with yes men. Kaya, diktador, di ba? Their democratic systems are noisier. You hear opposition voices. There's usually a free press, etc. No, in Putin's case, I heard that because of the pandemic, he was even more isolated. No, for health protocol reasons. So bukod doon sa yung mga, even the yes men got fewer, no? So wala talaga makakalusot na mga opposing point of view, or even any kind of serious advice, no? But that raises the question of how rational he is, no? Kasi nga yan ang isang nakakatakot dito na kasi you hear na he's not going to use nuclear weapons because that would mean the mutual destruction of the US and Russia. But that's a rational way of thinking, no? Kasi I heard an analyst say na for Putin to do that would be suicidal, di ba? But we shouldn't forget that there have been dictators who have committed suicide, no? I mean, Hitler did when he saw that he was going to lose. So talagang instead of surrendering, he committed suicide, di ba? So that's of course one possible scenario here, and the scenario where Putin would actually do that, di ba? Literally the nuclear option, But aside from that, no, I mean, parang I've heard that I've read that in a way Ukraine has already won. It's just a matter of time. So itong Russia, what it's fighting for is just pride, di ba? In fact, Ukraine it has been rolling them back in a way, at great cost, of course, no. So the question here is, ano ba talagang motivation? What's the game plan here? Sabi mo kanina, very often leaders act on personal impulse, diba? Citing some examples. Putin, of course, has been citing, security issues, the bogeyman of Nazism in Ukraine, which we know is probably not true because Zelensky himself is Jewish. So why would he be a Nazi, diba? Etc. No, so anong tingin mo rito? I mean, what's the possible game plan of Russia here? Kasi their motivation would help explain where this war is going.
the analysis of some, pag pinakinggan mo yung mga pro-Russia narratives, at even and some of these narratives are have been called as disinformation, no? During the start of the war, there were a lot of narratives na Russia, this is actually a defensive war launched by Russia because ang perception niya, and this is why in international security perceptions matter more than realities. Ang perception niya, they are being encircled by NATO, itong military alliance in Europe, of which the US is a primary convener as well. Na kaya nga ang greatest fear nila from the Russian side is if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, that will complete the encirclement. And ang feeling ng Russia, this is the Cold War all over again, no? Europe being uniting against Russia with the help of the United States, and therefore they are simply taking charge of Ukraine, instituting ang una nilang objective, regime change, di ba? Para maglagay kasi they tried putting a pro-Russia na natanggal naman nung Orange Revolution. No? So in a way, the idea here, at dito mo makikita na despite everything, there is still a modicum of domestic support by Russians, kasi nga in their minds they are being threatened, and Putin is actually their hero for standing up against the West, and not only that, for doing everything to protect Russia's security interests.
So what country is next, no? I mean, assuming manalo yung Russia dito, or even if they don't win yet in Ukraine, or don't win at all in Ukraine, may lumalabas na reports na Moldova is next, no? Kumbaga may may domino effect ito sa Europa, and that's also what's making countries further west, including NATO countries, nervous.
Right. Kasi parang ang lalabas nito, and this is why, if you notice, after what happened in Ukraine, a lot of other European countries na hindi naman sila aligned started to consider NATO membership. Meaning, some countries in the Baltics have started the process of choosing a side, no? And they want to be protected because they feel na if Ukraine falls, no? The other countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union will be next. And this creeping act of Russia, kaya malakas yung narrative sa Russia itself, kasi parang nire-reclaim lang ng Russia yung empire na nawala, na for them kasalanan to ng US because the US have westernized and have democratized and made them liberal democracies, a lot of these European countries. That's the fear of a lot of the neighboring European countries, even Poland for some reason. But we must also remember that such a situation between a big hegemonic country like Russia and a small country like Ukraine, marami itong parallels, no, sa iba't ibang parte ng mundo, no? Countries that have territorial disputes, countries that have maritime issues with each other, and when the invasion of Ukraine happened, hindi naging mahirap na i-relate to sa mismo, in fact, sa sitwasyon natin sa Pilipinas. Kaya nga part ng disinformation, meron din tayo dito sa local, may nagsasabi na tama yung neutrality kasi pag kumampi tayo sa Ukraine, it gives daw a go signal to countries like China to invade us. And tama na maging neutral, na wala tayong kakampiyan kasi we are going to have retaliation kung sakali, which is of course not true. But naging parte ng disinformation na naka-angkla din na we should not fight the wars of the US and the West. So tama lang na maging neutral tayo. But we all know that neutrality always favors the aggressor. So klaro dito that Russia was not provoked. Russia did an invasion, no, and it was an act of usurpation of the territorial integrity of another state, a smaller state, a weaker state, na kung walang disinformation, dapat ang sensitivity natin mga Pilipino dapat nasa Ukraine, kasi tayo araw-araw na may incursion sa ating teritoryo at sa ating areas of our country where we have sovereign rights. It happens every day. So bakit tayo kumakampi doon sa aggressor? No, yun yung matinding ano doon eh. But because we live in an age of disinformation, nadidistort na lahat, including yung lived experiences natin as a small country who has been bullied and continues to be bullied, no, by a stronger state.
Okay, balikan ko lang tong punto mo about neutrality, no? And I'll play a little devil's advocate here. And I know you're a student of history then, no? And let's go further back in history to the start of World War II. May nagsasabi kasi na kung hindi tayo colony ng US, I guess not just allied with the US, an actual part of the territory of the US, hindi tayo sana binomba ng Japan at in-invade at inoccupy, no? If we had been neutral, Manila would not have been like one of the most destroyed cities in the world, no? May validity ba yung point of view na yun? Or do you think kung for some reason naging neutral tayo nung 1940s ay lulusobin pa rin tayo ng Japan?
I would agree na marahil hindi tayo pinulbos, lalo na ng Manila, kasi dineclare na natin siyang open city, no? And other Southeast Asian capitals did not experience such aggression and complete, no, neutralization by Japan. Pero yung sabihin na Japan could have left us and could have, not invaded us is a total misnomer, because at i-relate ko to sa ngayon, no, yung geopolitical location ng Pilipinas. No? Hindi natin pwedeng baguhin ang geography natin eh, yung lugar natin sa mapa, no? We whether it's a curse or a blessing, hindi natin pwedeng hilahin yung Pilipinas away from its current position. Yung geopolitical location natin has always been very crucial in any form of power projection in Asia. Kaya kung titignan mo, bakit dito nilagay right after World War II yung pinakamalaking US bases in the Asia Pacific? Bakit China is violating our maritime space? Kasi parte tayo ng geostrategy ng China on its eastern frontier, yung island chain strategy, no? So in other words, pag sinabi natin nag-neutral tayo, iiwan ba tayo at peace ng mga superpowers? I highly doubt that, because given where we are in the map, we will be pulled in any form of game, superpower game or major power game in the region. Kasi nga kung nasaan po tayo na nakalagay sa mapa. So given that reality, kailangan yung polisiya natin nakaangkla, how do we protect our national interest given this reality, no? Na hindi tayo iiwan at na lang na at peace ng mga superpowers ito. Makikialam, they will try to influence us. The strategy is not to pray that they don't leave us alone. The strategy is, or hope, the strategy is, given that they will not leave us alone, what should we do in order to defend and protect our national interests?
Okay, well, nabanggit mo nga na may parallels, no, na sa ibang lugar, sa ibang bahagi ng mundo yung nagaganap ngayon sa Ukraine, no? And in particular, you mentioned China, no, which has been claiming territories not currently under their control, or they're trying to control them, or they're in the process of controlling them, no, depending on what you're referring to. But their biggest goal right now is a takeover of Taiwan, no? And Taiwan is being compared to Ukraine in a way, no? Na parang ang sinasabi ng iba ay China is looking closely at what is happening in Ukraine to see whether Ukraine will receive enough assistance to defend itself, etc. And of course, China is being compared to Russia, being the aggressor with imperial goals. How do you think the Ukraine war is affecting the way China is thinking, planning? Do you think their decisions in the next few years or maybe months could depend on the outcome of the war in Ukraine?
Very interesting yung ano na yon, kasi maraming moving pieces dito, no, because we all know that wars take a toll on the resources, no, and mobilization capacity of a country. And if you're a country, regardless of whether you're a small, middle, or superpower, you don't want to fight two wars at a time, no? So kaya nga when China was warned not to be involved in the war on Ukraine, I think on China's part, wala din sa kanilang rationality to participate in the Ukraine war, knowing that something could happen or they could decide, no, to do something along the Strait of Taiwan, no, and kasi marami naman pwedeng possibilities sa Taiwan, hindi lang naman outright invasion yon, no, pwede naman blockade, pwedeng regime change, pwede naman ma-disarm lang yung major weapons aggressive capabilities ng Taiwan, no. But kung ako rin ng Amerika, I also do not like that a war on the Taiwan Strait will happen because I will also be overstretched, no. So sa tingin ko hindi naman maganda, no, but the restraint is there because one war at present in the world is already affecting us, no, massively. Supply chains, energy, economically, no, inflationary pressures. What more if we have two? At hindi naman sa kung may mangyari sa Taiwan Strait, malaking epekto sa ating bansa. Much larger than the Ukraine because of the proximity, but as well as because of the possible players involved, no? China, the US, and Taiwan itself, no? Let's start with the 150,000 Filipinos in the Taiwan island. No? So I mean, paano mo i-repatriate 'yon? Kung sakaling magkaroon ng full-blown crisis, no, sa island. And if you're Taiwanese and magkaroon ng refugee crisis, ano yung pinakamalapit na bansa na pupuntahan mo? Exactly. And ito yung nakakalimutan ng marami, we are obligated under international law to accept them because we are the only Southeast Asian country who signed the Convention on Statelessness and the Convention on Refugees. Kasi yun yung kasaysayan din natin, di ba? We accepted all these refugees coming in from the Jews during the Holocaust to the Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. Kasi nga, we have signed, no? And we tried to be a haven, a sanctuary for stateless persons in terms of our diplomatic history.
Well, yun na nga, no? China parang may Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality ito, no? Because of its economic interconnections, no, with the rest of the world, no. It's got a very powerful economy that's dependent on trade and good relations with the rest of the world, no. Ang dami niyang provocations, no. So parang that's something that I guess that's also an internal struggle in China, no. I'm sure there are some hawks. There are hawks versus doves struggles there, and there are hawks, probably mga warmongers sa China na parang trying to push the Chinese leaders to, taking what they think is historically theirs, no? Yung of Taiwan is one, of course, and then there are islands all over the Pacific, especially in the South China Sea, So who do you think will win out here, no? Kasi a lot of these countries' aggressive actions are driven actually by domestic politics. That's what some analysts are saying about Russia. No, I mean, it's not really security that's their main concern. It's or external security. It's Putin's paranoia about his own power in the Russia's domestic scene.
Right. In fact, kaya nga merong nagsasabi that kasi sa international relations, may tinatawag tayong the diversionary theory of war. No, a lot of leaders declare war or starts adventures, aggressive adventures in foreign policy to gain domestic legitimacy. So because yung rally round the flag effect, no, meaning may kalaban tayo, so let's unite. Wag na natin isipin na unpopular ako or na marami akong corruption na ginawa kasi mas may malaking kalaban, no? And they say this is one of the main provocations for China to be aggressive on Taiwan because at present medyo merong pressures yung nangyari sa COVID-19 policy ng China. So therefore, the Communist Party including Xi Jinping is not as popular as before, and therefore kailangan ng new sources of legitimacy, which a war that will claim their renegade province, Taiwan, is something that will unite and makakalimutan, matatakpan na yung mga policy failures, no, ng Chinese Communist Party, lalo na nung pagdating nung COVID. So tama ka, no, talagang may domestic basis ang foreign policy adventures lalo na ng mga both, no, authoritarian and even democratic countries. Let's remember, at the height of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, Bill Clinton supported the bombing of Yugoslavia, no, and the Balkans. So kailangan natin include doon, no, that these countries, these governments, often their play in the chess of global affairs is a move dictated by their play in their domestic game of chess back home.
One of the things that's hard to understand is, China, meron siyang kind of official gestures of friendship and nice words about the Philippines, and then you've got this kind of a military laser attack on the Philippine Coast Guard. Of course, on the Chinese side, they're saying, ano lang yan, that's we were doing something much more innocent, like measuring distance, ganyan, no? But it was regarded as an aggressive act, no, by our Coast Guard, no? So parang, ano to, are some of China's forces kind of acting rogue? Ano ba to, rogue? Or parang may utos siyang galing sa taas na, uy, sundutin nyo yung Coast Guard nila para malaman na wag sila masyadong gumagala dito. Parang it just seems so heavy-handed and even clumsy. No,
right.
Kasi it's not winning them any pogi points
right.
With anyone. And then i-deny pa nila yung parang obvious, may video naman, di ba? I mean, tapos there are doctors who are saying that type of laser can actually cause blindness, no? I mean, etc.
Right. I think na caught off guard yung China dito na hindi kala nila hindi aalma yung Pilipinas because that was our behavior before, no, under the previous administration, na kahit anong gawing incursion, may mga binanggana na fishermen, silence, no? Nagulat, hindi naman siguro nagulat, but they did not anticipate the summoning, I think, of the ambassador and beyond the diplomatic protest. So they had to scramble and think of ways to an alibi, no? So yung alibi na hindi, nag-navigate lang kami. I mean, I'm sorry, we were not born yesterday, no? Hindi ko alam kung sino napapaniwala nung ganun na excuse, but what is happening really at debate to, no? Kasi wala rin tayong masyadong information on what happens inside China actually, di ba? May nagsasabi that hindi naman ganun katindi yung control ng Chinese Communist Party with the entire Chinese government, that some actions might actually be bureaucratic political decisions of certain institutions, no? In this case, Coast Guard. But we all know yung Chinese Coast Guard kasi, strategy na nila yan na kunyari Coast Guard, but they're actually deputized and authorized by the military, by the PLA Navy, no? So, I mean, hindi rin natin pwedeng sabihin na diretso from Beijing yung nangyayari na yun because I'm sure napakadaming matters na pinagkakabala ng Beijing, but we also cannot deny the fact, no, that Beijing, the government of Xi Jinping, is trying to legitimize and trying to turn the tables around in saying that it's actually the Philippines that is incursing into the territory of China and not the matagal na nilang strategy to na parang sila pa yung nasa
Agreed.
tama. Oo, nasa tama. When all their behavior and says otherwise.
Could it be na sumusundot sila ng ganon to see how the US will respond? Because after all, we do have a mutual defense treaty with the United States, no? Hindi pa malinaw kung ano yung coverage nun. But in this case, even though the Philippine side has been saying, or at least the Coast Guard has been saying that was an aggressive act, no, against them, the US has not done anything to retaliate. I mean, may mga, may mga supportive words para sa Pilipinas, pero beyond that, wala siyang ginawa. So if that was part of the tactics ng China, then they were effective. They effectively learned na walang gagawin yung Amerika if it does something like that. So they can actually keep escalating until they've reached the patience of reach the limits of the patience of America. If the US intends to retaliate at all for anything, no, dito sa Mutual Defense Treaty.
Right. I think the latest news is that now there are exploratory talks on joint Coast Guard drills in the West Philippine Sea between the Philippines and the US. But beyond the US, alam natin that our Coast Guard is also significantly receiving help from Japan. Kaya nga very critical yung trip ni President Marcos sa Japan a few weeks ago. That what he is, I think, and hopefully tama yung basa ko sa strategiya ng administrasyon na to, that it is not simply putting the country in the middle of US-China rivalry na parang either or lang. Either pumili tayo sa China or sa US. But there's actually more plurality, more diversity in terms of seeking security partners or countries that we can cooperate with. So for example, yung sa Japan na Coast Guard assistance, actually matagal na yun, no? Even during the time of Duterte, no? For some reason, Duterte doesn't see Japan as negative and as threatening as the United States or other Western powers. And because of that, gradually, yung Coast Guard capability natin, although malayo pa rin siya, sa panapat sa China and all, but I think there's now increasing realization that if China's game is to use Coast Guard ships to harass, then kahit pa paano man lang matapatan natin, in terms of our Coast Guard. So in fact, that's good because it demilitarizes the conflict, Coast Guard to Coast Guard yung magiging but of course we all know pag sa international relations, pag tinatapatan mo kasi, then it escalates, At yun yung iniiwasan natin, that it escalates further to the point that a mere accident could be seen as an act of aggression.
Well, itong provocations ng China, which have been going on for a while now, but recently there been a number of Chinese fighter planes that have been detected crossing the air defense zone ng Taiwan, no? These are clear signals, no? So why would China want to signal an invasion if that's really part of their plan? Or paper tiger lang ba yung China na thinking that Taiwan will just fold because nakakita sila ng mga fighter jets from China. Ano bang point nila? I mean, China has been provoking here and there, no? Ano bang what's that accomplishing ba? Just to show that they can do it? Di ba? Lalang nagiging praning yung mga neighboring countries niya.
Right. Yun sa Taiwan, very complicated na issue yan for China. Kasi as far as they are concerned, Taiwan is the only missing piece. Kasi nabalik na sa kanila yung Hong Kong, di ba? They have literally occupied the entire South China Sea, no? So Taiwan seems to be the missing piece, no, to the China dream, no, na Middle Kingdom, no? So very complicated 'yan. And Taiwan is not just any other country. It's a wealthy, well-developed, liberal democracy that is the total opposite of the form of governance in China. But I think yung signaling na ganon, marahil, no, at na-illustrate to yung recent local elections in Taiwan wherein the ruling party of the president ni Tsai Ing-wen lost, no? And that prompted her to in fact resign from her party. What China at the very least wants is a friendlier government in Taipei to China. And so that they may not even need to do military action. No? And kung pagbabasihan itong latest local elections in Taiwan, baka mag-shift to the Kuomintang party again, yung maging ruling party in Taiwan. And that might be something that the US might want for the short term, because that will not drag the US to a war with China over Taiwan. Because if the US refused to help Taiwan, kung sakali, kasi may mutual defense, may Taiwan Act, di ba? Mawawalan talaga na ng credibility ang US. And sa atin, if the US refuses to help Taiwan in times of a Chinese invasion, lalo tayong hindi maniniwala that the US will do the same pag tayo naman yung nagkaroon ng security threat.
Basically, ang sinasabi mo, part of the reason for these provocations is to kind of influence domestic politics in Taiwan. And in a way, it was effective. Okay. So, kung sakaling tuloy-tuloy itong pagkakaroon ng friendlier governments in Taiwan friendlier towards China, would a better case scenario be a peaceful reunification between Taiwan and China? For a while there was in Hong Kong, di ba? Parang two systems, one country. Di ba? Sabi mo, Taiwan is a liberal democracy with a free press and free elections and all of that, which you don't have in China. There could be an agreement where China will just respect that system, but Taiwan will declare itself a province of China, for example. Posibleng that could help dissolve a lot of these tensions. Posibleng, is there a prospect for that?
Right. It's a possibility, but it will be the defeat of democracy around the world. Kasi parang
defeat of democracy. Okay.
Yeah, around the world. Kasi kumbaga, if you have a thriving democracy, no, that in which other democracies allowed it to be undemocratic and to be returned to a country that it will surely repress, as what we have seen in Hong Kong, no? Then it gives a signal na we can sacrifice countries for our pure strategic interests, no? So sa tingin ko, if the US also did not do anything and allow this peaceful, and in my own analysis, it won't be peaceful, because having been to Taiwan many times, the Taiwanese there believe they're no longer Chinese, no? That they have a distinct identity, no? And having a friendlier government, friendlier to Beijing, doesn't mean that they subscribe to Xi Jinping and to the governance and the culture of China, because iba na rin sila, no? And this is why some Taiwanese will surely not accept this. And so kumbaga, kahit yung peaceful reunification, sa akin maaaring magkaroon pa rin ng problema doon eh. It might be a civil war within Taiwan if that is the case, because some Taiwanese will not accept a peaceful reunification.
And if China invades Taiwan, do you think the Taiwanese will fight China the way the Ukrainians are currently fighting Russia? Yeah.
I mean, all public opinion polls in Taiwan right now are hindi naman tinanong whether you will defend, no, but normally yung mga tanong hindi provocative, kasi syempre pag nagtanong ka sa survey noon at nalaman ng Beijing yon, medyo it will be complicated. Ang tanong is what identity do you affiliate with? And increasingly over time, the Chinese identity has been on the decline, and kaya nga the Taiwanese no longer even want to call their country Republic of China, no? Kasi dati yun yung official name, di ba? Nila supposedly, but they want to be called Taiwan because over the years they have evolved, their society, their institutions evolved far away from the Chinese model that China is trying to peddle to the world, di ba? Yung state-sponsored capitalism but socialist yung but authoritarian, no, politically, no. Ito yung formula na gusto nilang ibenta, no, and may following yan dito sa Pilipinas, di ba, na parang okay lang na wala na tayong mga karapatan basta mag-develop this type of duality between development and democracy. It's actually China that is the primary example right now that it is trying to export, no? That you don't need democracy, you just need development.
So itong pag-pivot ni Pangulong Marcos, no, from the Duterte foreign policy positions on a range of things, no, do you think it's made the Philippines more secure?
I think it made us somehow, no, so far kasi very early pa lang, no? And I think there's still going to be a lot of changes because if we look at the first few months of the Duterte administration, ganun din naman, di ba? He also challenged the orthodoxy, but eventually it did not, in my assessment, it did not lead to a defense and protection of our national interest. I don't think anyone who studies Philippine foreign and security policy can declare that our national interests were better secured after 6 years of the Duterte administration. So in this regard, it seems like the Marcos administration's steps are correct in terms of protecting our national interests. But ang tanong dito is, are these going to be consistent moves? Or this is just for now until some events happen and maaari pang magbago. At dahil nga mahina yung mga institusyon natin, itong mga decisions na to, madali din siyang mabago, madali din siyang mabaliktad, no? So I am still we still need to monitor and to see what the next moves are. But let us also remember that foreign policy in the country is not simply made by the president, that there are a lot of other actors involved, and alam natin that there are some, no, institutions in the country that have already been influenced by China, and therefore they will not simply watch and accept if a government starts to be very critical and very antagonistic towards China.
Okay, malinaw. Thank you for your time and perspective, Dr. Aries Arugay, a political science professor at UP Diliman. It's been a pleasure. Mabuhay ka.
Marami pong salamat.
Hi, I'm Howie Severino. Check out the Howie Severino Podcast, an original for GMA News and Public Affairs. New episodes will stream every Thursday. Listen for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms.